Have you ever truly considered what a man seeks in the moments of deep connection? It's a question that goes far beyond mere physical contact or the pursuit of pleasure. There's a profound depth to this experience, one that many men themselves may not consciously recognize. Society often simplifies masculine desire, boiling it down to basic impulses, a quest for fleeting pleasure, and a focus on the physical. Yet, depth psychology shows us that our actions are rooted in something far beneath the surface. According to Carl Jung, much of what we do originates in the unconscious, that part of the mind that remains concealed even from ourselves. Intimacy is a moment when a man can open himself up and allow for vulnerability, breaking through the armor society demands he wear to appear strong, decisive, and unwavering. It is a unique portal to the soul, where rigidity gives way to authenticity. In this experience, a man has the chance to lower his guard and connect with something he doesn't always know how to name. Many men discover, though often unconsciously, that what they crave most in closeness is not just pleasure, but a true connection, acceptance, and the feeling of being seen for who they are, not as a desired body, but in their full essence, with all their doubts, insecurities, fears, and attachments, without the mask of a strong man. This dimension makes intimacy a complex territory, as it touches not only the physical, but also the soul. What unfolds in this space can reveal deep, long-hidden truths. Consider, for example, those times in close relationships when you felt comfort and the freedom to be yourself, while in others, blocks like shame, guilt, or fear arose almost automatically. These feelings are not random. They are directly linked to old experiences and beliefs, to wounds often carried since childhood that have not yet healed. Jung argued that what we do not confront within ourselves eventually manifests in our relationships with others, especially in our most private connections. Thus, how we relate to each other in an intimate context is a direct reflection of our relationship with ourselves. Another important and seldom discussed point is the degree to which a person can experience genuine pleasure by pleasing another. This satisfaction transcends physical skill or technical performance. It touches upon a subtle, almost spiritual dimension of being. Jung explained that within every man there is an inner feminine energy, called the anima, which represents sensitivity, emotion, and intuition. When a man connects with this part of himself, he accesses a side that doesn't seek control or power, but rather to exchange, care, and listen. Therefore, when a man derives pleasure from giving pleasure, he may be, even unconsciously, accessing this inner feminine energy that resides within him. This connection can be forgotten or suppressed by cultural pressures, causing many men to navigate relationships impulsively or by repeating patterns, seeking external approval without realizing it. Nevertheless, behind this search lies a deep need for acceptance, to feel important and valued not only by others, but also by oneself. When this desire to please is born from a genuine, connected place, it transforms intimacy into a sacred ritual, where the exchange goes beyond the physical and becomes a silent conversation between souls. But it's important to reflect on whether this desire always stems from authenticity or if it is sometimes filled with neediness, fear, and a demand for approval. Not every gesture that seems generous is truly an act of love. Often, it is born from an attempt to fill inner voids or compensate for old wounds. Jung invites us to question what truly drives a man when he dedicates himself to intimacy. Is it genuine love, or is it the ego seeking recognition? Many men use the act of giving themselves over in intimacy as a way to fill an internal emptiness, to avoid abandonment, or to prove their worth. This doesn't make them false or malicious, just human. But living without awareness of these motives can lead to painful cycles. Jung said that what we do not bring to consciousness repeats as fate. In private connections, this repetition can be harsh. Men trapped in emotional dependency might confuse it with surrender, believing they are loving when they are actually erasing themselves, thinking they are caring when they are, in fact, punishing themselves. The ego strives for praise and recognition. It wants to be seen as the ideal partner, but true love needs no external validation. It simply is. To reach this authenticity, one must navigate the chaos of our unresolved histories, the absences and rejections that have marked our journey. Only in this deep dive can intimacy change form and become a genuine presence, a release of control, and a true surrender. This process requires courage and sincerity, because every desire brings with it both light and shadow. And it is this shadow that we tend to avoid. We pretend it doesn't exist, but it always reveals itself, especially in the most private moments when the masks fall away and the body exposes what words do not say. For Jung, the shadow is everything we suppress or reject in ourselves. Impulses, emotions, and memories. Not because we are bad, but because we learn to hide feelings like fear, fragility, jealousy, and insecurity. The field of human desire, especially of a close physical nature, is fertile ground for the shadow's manifestation. Often, what excites us also frightens us. What we wish to do with another person may say more about our own struggles than about love or pleasure. It could be a desire to dominate, to assert oneself, or to prove something that we feel we have never been. This shadow hides in the details, in a comment that comes out of nowhere, in the discomfort after an act, in a feeling of emptiness, even when everything seemed to go well. Jung asserted that until we recognize this shadow, it will govern our lives, and we will be hostages to a repeating destiny. How many times have you observed someone repeating the same relationship patterns, ending things in the same way, attracting the same type of person? That is the shadow, operating on autopilot. In intimate closeness, this repetition is even more painful because it touches what is most vulnerable in us: the body, acceptance, the fear of being unwanted, the terror of being rejected. When we are unaware of this shadow, we tend to blame the other person or ourselves, not understanding that the source of the problem lies within us. The path is not to eliminate the shadow, but to recognize it, to look at it with honesty. Only then can intimacy cease to be a field of conflict and transform into a space of truth, where desire is no longer a reflection of needs, but an expression of a conscious and human presence. Within every man resides an often forgotten side, a sensitive, emotional, and intuitive part that Jung called the anima. This inner feminine dimension has nothing to do with biology, but with the part of the psyche that dreams, feels, and seeks depth in connections. The problem is that from a very young age, most men are taught to silence this side. They are taught to suppress tears, hide fear, and hold back affection. This creates a distance from the self, generating an inner emptiness that is difficult to explain but manifests in various ways throughout life, especially in close relationships. When a man seeks someone on a deeply personal level, it is not only his body that draws near. His soul also moves in an attempt to rediscover itself. Even without realizing it, many men project onto another person what they have lost in themselves, as if in that partner they have found their missing piece. This is why some men are so deeply captivated by certain people. It's not just about physical attraction, but about the hope of finding a dormant part of themselves once more. However, this projection becomes risky, because what they are looking for in the other person actually needs to be rediscovered within themselves. Acceptance, tenderness, and affection are all part of the anima itself. But until a man recognizes these as his own, he will remain in a constant search, always expecting someone else to complete what he himself has left behind. In intimacy, this is revealed when a man idealizes his partner, assigning her the role of the perfect lover, mother, confidant, or savior. But no single person can bear this weight without the connection eventually breaking. When this expectation is not met, disappointment, alienation, and pain arise. It's a difficult and painful cycle, but at the same time, it reveals something essential. A man's true desire is not just for another person, but for a reunification with what has been lost within him. Intimacy thus becomes an attempt, not always conscious, to approach one's own essence through contact with another. The process that Jung called individuation speaks precisely of this journey, of ceasing to be a repetition of others and becoming who you truly are. It is a process of integrating all parts of the psyche, light and shadow, strength and vulnerability, reason and emotion. And contrary to what many believe, our deep personal connections are not separate from this journey. In fact, they are one of the most direct paths for this integration to occur. Intimacy is a space where a person shows themselves with fewer masks, less control, and more true to their essence. Therefore, what happens in these moments says a great deal about what is not yet healed. It is there that insecurities, past traumas, old fears, and desires that the conscious mind tries to suppress all come to the surface. Many view the physical act of connection as a separate moment, something unrelated to the inner world. But everything a person feels, hides, or carries appears there, because intimacy is a mirror of the soul. That is why it holds such great transformative power. When a person begins to surrender consciously, with presence and a listening heart, they start to see themselves, to recognize the patterns they repeat and the voids they try to fill. The body is no longer just an instrument of pleasure, but becomes a bridge between the external and the internal. Every gesture, every touch, every silence is an opportunity to open inner doors. This isn't about romanticizing or creating an unattainable ideal. It's about seeing real intimacy as a field of self-knowledge and healing, as long as a person is willing to truly look at themselves. This path is not comfortable. It requires that old beliefs about masculinity, desire, and love be questioned and often deconstructed. But when this happens, desire becomes an expression of the soul, and intimacy becomes a place of meeting, not of escape. Deep down, many men fear being unseen. Not unseen in the sense of visibility or superficial recognition, but unseen in their essence, as if no one has ever witnessed their full being. From their early years, they learn to hide their feelings, not to show weakness, and to pretend to be secure even when everything inside is in chaos. This creates a void that is not filled by applause or external achievements. In intimate closeness, this fear manifests itself disguised as a need for approval, a desire for validation. The intimate act often becomes a silent plea. See me, accept me, confirm my value. The problem is that because this request is not clearly articulated, it remains hidden in behaviors, expectations, and demands. When the other person does not respond as the man expects, he feels rejected, unseen, and inadequate. And often they pull away not from a lack of feeling, but because they are re-experiencing the pain of non-acceptance. The validation a man seeks will not come from another. It must be born from the process of self-knowledge itself, from the awareness of one's most vulnerable parts, from the acceptance of one's own humanity. True intimacy is not about bearing the body, but about bearing the soul with all its imperfections and contradictions. The soul communicates through symbols, sensations, and experiences, not just through words. Closeness is one of those symbolic experiences where the truth of each person is presented unfiltered. It shows what is still wounded, what still needs to be integrated. So it can be uncomfortable, but it can also be the place where transformation begins. It is in the contact with another, in the uncovered meeting of body and soul, that a man has the opportunity to leave his roles aside and simply be. And when that happens, intimacy ceases to be a necessity and becomes a true expression, a conscious exchange, a holistic presence. True intimacy, when lived with presence and awareness, is not a place to prove one's worth or demonstrate one's strength. It is a space where a person can allow themselves to exist as they are, without masks or roles. In this meeting, desire ceases to be merely a reflection of a deficit and becomes an expression of authentic presence. It is when a touch stops seeking approval and becomes a gesture of listening. A gaze sheds expectation and becomes a real connection. Silence gains meaning because it allows for the other soul to be felt. And it is in this deep listening, in this exchange without artifice, that intimacy becomes the truest mirror of our essence. Jung warned us that what remains unconscious governs us, and in our most private connections, this becomes evident. What a man is striving for when he gives himself to another is not always clear to him. Often, he thinks he desires the other person, but in reality, he desires himself. He wants to find that inner part that was abandoned, silenced, and stifled over the years. The problem arises when this search is placed on the shoulders of another, as if the partner is obligated to heal, complete, or fulfill him. No relationship can sustain this weight for long without causing disappointment, pain, and alienation. This is why many men find themselves trapped in repeating cycles of relationships that begin with fascination and end in hurt. They approach one another hoping to find what they have lost in themselves. When the other person cannot withstand this idealization, the man feels betrayed, rejected, and forgotten. But the truth is that the missing piece is not outside, but within. It is in the courage to look at this internal absence, to acknowledge one's own wounds and integrate them into the whole of who you are, that this cycle can be broken. This is the path of individuation, the process of becoming whole and true, where a person no longer depends on another to feel complete because he has become a presence for himself. In this context, our deepest connections are not just a physical act. They are one of the most powerful pathways for self-knowledge and integration. It is here that a man reveals himself with fewer defenses, where the truths he hides from himself emerge most strongly. Touch, desire, pleasure, and even discomfort are doors that, when opened with awareness, lead to an encounter with oneself. Of course, this path is neither easy nor comfortable. It requires re-examining beliefs, letting go of masks, and accepting one's own frailties. But when a man allows himself to walk this path, intimacy transforms from a field of struggle into a place of healing and presence. Within a man lives the anima, that sensitive, intuitive, and receptive part that is so often silenced. To reconnect with this energy is not to lose strength, but to find balance. It is this part that allows for true connection, for attentive listening, for the desire to exchange rather than control. When a man finds the anima within himself, he stops expecting the other person to be the source of what he lacks and starts sharing what he himself carries. This completely changes the quality of the connection. What was once a search for approval becomes an exchange. What was a necessity becomes a choice. What was a lack becomes a presence. The fear of being invisible, so common among men, begins to dissolve when he sees himself, when he recognizes his light and his shadow, when he validates his own emotions, when he allows himself to be whole without demanding from another what only he can offer himself. The intimate act, in this way, ceases to be a silent request for recognition and becomes a real meeting, where two beings see, listen to, and welcome each other as they are. This is the beauty of conscious intimacy. It does not demand perfection, but truth. It does not demand performance, but presence. And the transformation it fosters depends not on ready-made formulas, but on the willingness of each person to look at themselves with courage and honesty. When a man says goodbye to the character the world taught him to play and allows himself to be just a person, imperfect but real, something deep within him moves. Intimacy thus becomes a space where desire is an expression of the soul. Touch is the language of the heart, and the gaze is a meeting of essences. And what was once a field of anxious searching is transformed into a territory of discovery, exchange, and growth. This is the invitation that Jung's psychology extends to us. Intimacy is more than a need. It becomes a path toward individuation, toward a true encounter with oneself and with the other. The body, in this process, is not just an instrument of pleasure, but a bridge between the internal and external, between the conscious and the unconscious. A touch becomes a gesture of healing, a gaze becomes recognition, and silence becomes a space for listening. And all this happens not because there is a script to follow, but because there is presence, attention, and truth in the encounter. The great transformation of conscious intimacy is this. It takes us out of an automatic state and places us in the here and now, whole and available to the other, and especially to ourselves. And it is there that it becomes sacred, not in a religious sense, but in the sense of a space where the human and the profound meet.